All art is propaganda. The only difference is the kind of propaganda. Since art is essential for human life, it can't just belong to the few. Art is the universal language, and it belongs to all mankind. All painters have been propagandists, or else they have not been painters. Every artist who has been worth anything in art has been such a propagandist. Every strong artist has been a propagandist. I want to be a propagandist, and I want to be nothing else. I want to use my art as a weapon. This was a quote by artist Diego Rivera highlighting the importance of art as not just a commodity to be enjoyed, but something that can rally a society to a cause and change people's conception of society. This project will be focusing on the work Detroit Industry by Diego Rivera to explore his stance and understanding of the effect that industry has on society. To understand this work, we will need to contextualize its location, so we will first be exploring Detroit as a city. In the early 20th century, Detroit was a young city, but was one of the fastest growing cities in America, going from roughly 460,000 in 1910 to just over 1.5 million in 1920. The population tripled in just a decade and would continue to grow during the next few decades. There were a number of circumstances promoting this growth, but the most prominent influence was the auto industry. One of the most important contributors was Henry Ford. Ford revolutionized industry because of the creation of the assembly line, which increased the rationalization and focused not on the work of individuals, but on their contribution to their piece of the larger project. Ford believed in compensating his workers well. This is not to say that Ford was just a benevolent and charitable boss. Rather, he believed that fair treatment would encourage workers to be loyal, work diligently, and invest in the product itself. Ford dreamed of a Ford in every driveway, speaking to the extensive influence of both Ford and the entire auto industry in Detroit. It also emphasized the lack of individuality of modern mass commercial production in both the product and that it stripped the individuality of the workers. This tremendous increase in the population and the growth of industry meant that there was a resulting shift in the position of Detroit into becoming an industrial superpower. The city then started considering the need for a corresponding increase in the cultural significance of the city. One of the first steps to this cultural significance was the creation of the Detroit Institute of Art, or the DIA, in 1927. Detroit dreamed of having an extensive and prominent public collection of art. William Valentinier was one of the first curators of the DIA and instrumental to its creation. While on a visit to California, Valentinier saw Rivera's work for the San Francisco's Pacific Stock Exchange Luncheon Club, and he dreamed of having his work in the DIA. Rivera received a tentative agreement with Valentinier, but Valentinier had to find a sponsor. Valentinier found that sponsor in Edsel Ford, the son and heir of industrialist Henry Ford. Edsel agreed to sponsor $10,000 to get Rivera to paint the DIA's garden court. Valentinier eventually received permission from the commission to have Rivera begin his work in April of 1932. His work continued for 10 months, in which he painted all 4 walls of the garden court, making a distinct statement about the place of industry in the natural world. We contextualize Detroit as a city, but we must also understand Diego Rivera. Rivera was born in 1866 in Mexico, where he was heavily influenced by the lives of Mexican farmers. He began his painting career focused on this way of life, and this influence can be seen throughout his work. During his life, he moved to Paris and began the process of shaping and refining his skill while being exposed to different ideologies, both in the art world and politically. In 1929, he married Frida Kahlo, a fellow artist who shared Rivera's political ideology. One of the political ideologies that greatly influenced his work and his life was the work of Marx and socialism, considered to be some of the most radical politics of the time. The revolutions of Mexico and Russia were very influential. The social understanding was one of the most prominent aspects of his work that led to certain groups refusing and censoring his work. One prominent example of the censoring of his murals was the Rockefeller family, who ordered Diego Rivera's mural, The Man at the Crossroads, destroyed. This mural features an image with a person in the likeness of Lenin and Marx, along with visual representations of some of the more radical socialist politics of the time. The Rockefeller family responded by demanding that it was destroyed, demonstrating that political statements exist in Rivera's work and a recognition that art is more than just a benign piece for consumption. This piece was completed the year after Detroit Industry, but it's important to recognize that his Marxist leanings were well known and appeared in a significant amount of his work. We've contextualized both Rivera as an artist and Detroit as a city, so we will now focus on Detroit Industry, Rivera's fresco in the DIA. We will begin our journey with the first wall, the east wall. This focuses on a baby inside of a womb. There are two women on either side of the baby. The entire wall focuses on the natural and organic, including the creation of life. Take the collection of fruit under the women, which highlights the concept that all of these visuals are naturally occurring and cannot be artificially synthesized. The next side we focus on is the north wall. This wall depicts the workers on the assembly line. It is characterized by slightly darker imagery in paint color than the east wall. There is something almost reminiscent of Hades in this image. These workers are pictured at the bottom of the image, as if in the bowels of hell, not just the factory. This is reinforced by the fires that seem to surround the workers, helping them work, but holding the potential for destruction. The top plate of these work continue with the almost mythological understanding because the people above this plate are almost modeled off of mythological gods who are observing the work and lives of their people. They are characterized by an almost indulgent and excessive appearance. They are looking down on their workers from a position of security and importance. They are viewing the workers from a seat of power. We'll next focus on the west wall. The most predominant of these images are the ones focused on planes, where the plates are entitled Aviation. It focuses on the history of Ford factories being used for fighter plane creation during the wars. The majority of planes were completely overhauled for this purpose. It is an ode to the patriotism of Ford as compared to the capitalistic focus of the majority of his production. The second part to this wall is the relief that depicts the world's interdependence. It emphasizes the importance of the connection between the North and the South, which is really raw materials and industrial production. This duality is represented in the Mexican symbolism, a half-face, half-skull on either side of the stall, emphasizing the coexistence of life and death. This is especially prominent because it depicts the practice of industrialists exploiting entire ecosystems in order to access rubber. It is a commentary that compares industry to death for the communities that they are exploiting. Our last wall is the south wall. The focus of his work is on the final production of product. Similar to the north wall, it echoes an almost mythological story, where workers are working on final production of their material goods while their bosses, or gods, are watching them indulgently from above. The next focus is on the people that are exploring the factory as if it is something to be used for pleasure. The variety of both these consumers and the factory workers highlight the concept that industrial work can overcome the boundaries that people have constructed in society. The other part to this wall are the medical plates that are on the bottom of the wall. It symbolizes that these services are accessible to the people. These plates focus on the rise of surgery and other medical advancements. This makes the statement that not all industry advancement is particularly bad. However, they can never lose sight of the organic and the humanity that they can help. The meaning of Detroit Industry is strengthened by its specific medium. Detroit Industry is a fresco. This is a painting style where artists paint onto freshly applied, wet lime plaster. The paint is absorbed into the plaster, and the pigment is bound into the actual structure of the wall. This is very important to Rivera's work because of its permanence. To eliminate the work, the entire wall must be compromised. Unlike a painting, it cannot be moved or simply covered. Because of its position, it cannot be transported and sold. It eliminates some of the commodification of art. It is not about convenience or ease, but it draws people to the DIA to enjoy the culture of the city. This permanence echoes the permanence of Detroit industry and the importance of industry to the entire city. The auto industry is part of the fabric and foundation of the city, just as the paint is part of the plaster. The permanence of this art form echoes the purpose of the entire work. The focus is on the relationship between the mechanical and the organic. It postures mechanical power as a darker form of life, but one that is possible to work in harmony with the natural. The purpose of this work is to demonstrate that there are negative impacts of industrialization, but they do not have to be the only ones. Instead, society must reconcile the conflict between the natural and the mechanical for the sake of the community.